Georgia. The journey through Georgia began 50 miles into the Chief Ladigo Rail Trail. After crossing the state line, I paused for a cool reprieve in a nearby body of water. The heat was becoming unbearable. I parked my bike at the top of a bridge and scaled down the bush-filled hillside towards a stream 50 feet below. Everything seemed calm at first, but I swear every mosquito in the forest smelled my blood and came to prey on me. They attacked my pale, sweaty skin almost immediately after I took my shirt off. I dove underwater as fast as possible and decided it wasn't worth the fight. I ran back up the hill, clawing through the bush, rocks, and slipping on the mud. Bitten up and drenched, I was at least cooled off and continued on. The trail changed names on the Georgia side and was now called the Silver Comet. I was hell-bent on taking the weekend off to spend time with my family friends, the Childers, with whom I had been estranged for over a decade. They were a family of 6 that lived in Salina, Kansas for a year while I was in high school. Something about them was special, and we all had this unique connection. After leaving Salina, they continued to move around the country several times, and we strayed from each other's radar. All the kids of adult age were moved out and dispersed. Knowing I would see Becca and Larry, the parents, was the only fuel I had left to make this 110-mile day to Atlanta happen. I chugged up twisted inclines through rainy downpours and humidity so thick I could barely breathe. I physically felt the Appalachians. As the sun slowly set in the evening, I had 20 miles to go and could hardly see anything through the darkness of the trees. I am a wimp when it comes to darkness, and the only thing going through my head was spooky movies. I could hear critters around me in every direction and see their reflective eyes hidden in the branches. Whenever I feel uneasy, I daydream about insane situations and create contingency plans about how I might react. Darkness causes my imagination to blur with reality. My only light source was a tiny flashing front and rear light. The sky started misting, my glasses fogged up, and my phone service intermittently went in and out. I was crossing my fingers that I would recognize the turn I needed to take without any real-time GPS. It's funny, the one time I needed to rely on Google Maps, I didn't have any service. I was completely drenched when I arrived on a 2-lane road in Powder Springs, Georgia. I was greeted by my friend Larry, and he led me safely to his driveway. That was a rough 14 hours on the saddle. I was exhausted, to say the least, but showing up to Larry and the family was absolutely glorious. They are super loving and hilarious. Becca was in the garage trying to get my picture, but everything went wrong with her phone. It was set on a 10-second timer and the flash wasn't on. We laughed pretty hard and didn't get the photo. It was bizarre to have not heard their voices in so long, and suddenly it felt like none of us were ever gone. I spent the 3-day weekend in their big, beautiful 2-story home, opening the art room as my bedroom. Becca is a painter and sculptor, and I was stoked to wake up next to her art every day. They drove me all over Atlanta to introduce me to the city. We went to an open mic where their son Elijah played an acoustic guitar set. Afterward, a group of people got on stage, started a drum circle, and sang in Portuguese. We found out this was the weekly Brazilian dance night. They got the groove going and more than half the room knew the lyrics. We felt a little left out, but dancing was the real treat. They were having a samba. In this dance style, partners in the middle dance around each other. As you go along, the men and women have a secret handshake to pass off the dance to the next person who wants it. Ladies chest bump and guys tap knees, or as one guy told us, you can psych them out with a tap on the shoulder and steal it. So silly. Elijah and I got to dance a couple of rounds, and we loved it. Another adventure we embarked on was swimming at Sweetwater Nature Park. The park consisted of a series of trails built along a river of rock formations. You could walk out onto the rocks and swim in the river. We visited the original Chick-fil-A restaurant called the Dwarf House. It was built to resemble the cabin that the 7 dwarves lived in. The worst part about Atlanta was the traffic. I already hate driving cars, but that place is insane. I have a short temper with driving, and it brings out the worst in me. There's something about how society takes vehicles for granted that rubs me the wrong way. We practically drive death machines, and only about half the people driving feel like the road rules are essential. Traffic, parking, and commuting are all consequences of our addiction and reliance on engines. Unfortunately, it's a necessary evil in Western existence, but mainly because the powers that be haven't planned cities to be usable for the carless. As the years go by, I keep trying to bring my life closer to home and live without the machine if possible. I also used the weekend off to make some sorely needed upgrades to my bike. I had run all the treads off my tires and was ready to grab a new set for the next 2,500 miles. I also had been having trouble with my seat. It was made from this pleather type stuff and kept ripping due to the pressure and sweat of 12-hour shifts and causing sores. I had several friends suggest a full leather saddle in the past, but I felt I could never afford that quality. This time, I decided if I was going to survive 4 more months on the road, I needed something comfy to sit on. The leather saddles are comfortable because they shape to your ass, and the amount of rubbing is reduced once you fit like a glove. The downside to raw leather is that it takes some breaking in before you reap the benefits. I'd heard you could break in raw denim jeans by sitting in a bathtub of water. I decided to try the same concept with my leather seat. Voila! I dunked my seat in water to break it in and ended up shaping it to my tush and not ruining it. I was ready to roll by the time Monday morning came around.
I'm sorry, but we're interrupting your regularly scheduled broadcast to announce today's rain delay.
On this next part of the journey, I met with my best friend Michael to lead him on his first bike trip. We have known each other since the 7th grade and have stayed good friends even through his multiple moves across the country. He enjoyed biking and thought giving this touring thing a shot would be fun. I planned to meet him at a hotel in Lawrenceville, Georgia, and he would ride to his home in Simpsonville, South Carolina. Monday morning, I thanked the Childers for a fantastic weekend, then weaved my way out of Atlanta. Thankfully, I was able to stay on the city's outskirts and didn't have to traverse inner city roads. I got 10 miles out of town when an older gentleman in a Honda Fit waved me down. Tom was a tall man with short white hair and a welcoming smile. He was a fellow cyclist and invited me to join him for a snack at his place up the street. I gladly accepted the offer, and we shared stories over coffee. He introduced me to his wife and then told me about his riding in the mountains and how he'd ridden the bike across Georgia multiple times. He has 5 children and had taken them all on the statewide bike trip. He said he had battled cancer and tried to stay as active as possible. He was a Mormon and asked if I went to church. I told him I grew up in the church and that my folks were pastors, but I didn't really go anymore. He told me about a woman he met while hiking in Colorado. When he asked if she went to church, she replied, "Yeah, I go to church. The Church of the Big Blue Dome," and pointed towards the sky. I could track with this metaphor, and we both agreed on how beautiful nature is. It's refreshing to have something to connect to that's not religion, even when many people I encounter are of faith. Faith and religion are themes I've battled with for years. Through heartbreak and disappointment, I've allowed my worldview to shift on what God and faith mean in my life. I grew up in both the fundamentalist and evangelical church. My parents' church had a social work office and food pantry, so I was raised wanting to help people in need. Many things started to rub me the wrong way about the church and faith, even as far back as high school. The concept of megachurches and pastors making higher salaries than their congregation seemed odd. I felt like the whole creationism ideology was a big stretch from a book of the Bible that's basically prose. I didn't like the authority people gave the Bible's words. I saw firsthand that things aren't cut and dry the way that theologians and preachers want to interpret the statements of the apostles and Jesus. I also did not believe in evangelizing people. In my upbringing, I was taught to initiate conversations about people's relationship with Jesus and to feel bad for those who were caught in sin. As I grow older, I realize kindness has nothing to do with faith. It has to do with the love and respect of humanity's worth. Christianity taught me that its followers get too caught up in the taboos of sin and don't collectively act to make the world a better place to fulfill humans. This is not to say faith and religion don't have a purpose in society. They have served equally positive effects on the world as they have negative. If we can learn not to weaponize the words of religious texts and instead live by the golden rule of loving our neighbors, many things would be different. But then again, we would all have to look honestly at ourselves, and I doubt that will ever happen. I was happy to hear Tom's story and allow it to propel my own story on this big adventure. I enjoyed these random stops on the side of the road by cyclists who wanted to chat. We all just want to hear each other's stories and see how we can help each other. It's also great practice for me to embrace trust and overcome the fear of strangers that I am somehow ingrained with. These situations make me think of the old days when this was how people showed hospitality before the coffee shop became society's second home. I personally love hosting people in my home and have never really felt weird about inviting people over. I like to share what I have and enjoy conversation. Hosting at home is also cheaper and lends itself to a more controlled environment. I inched closer to Lawrenceville. I stopped to check my map and watched the skies turn black in real time. It felt like a time-lapse of the castle from the movie Snow White when the evil queen was mixing up diabolical potions. The heavens opened up and let out a downpour less than 5 miles from my hotel. Here I go, rolling with the punches again. I charged through the thick rain as fast and safely as I could. I hadn't seen Michael in a few years and was excited to visit his new home post-military. He had been in the Marines for 6 years and was now trying to figure out the rest of his life. Due to the nice climate, he and his girlfriend had settled in Simpsonville, South Carolina, and his brother Brock was living there temporarily. I also hadn't seen Brock for several years and was stoked to hear about his life as an adult. He was always the little scrub who stole our video games back in middle school. Now I'm proud to see him grow up and be more successful than I. They were waiting for me underneath the awning at our hotel as I was sopping wet and smiling as big as I could. We were all happy to see each other. I got inside and dried off and spent the rest of the evening catching up. I congratulated Michael on getting a solid bike bag set up. He had obsessed over it while we were planning this small trip. He appreciated having quality things and even bought rain gear, which came in handy as we experienced torrential downpour all the way to Athens. When I first told Michael that he should ride with me for a few days, he figured his leisurely bike riding on smooth, paved paths would be enough to prepare him for a Georgia excursion. I could not have predicted how difficult the terrain would end up. We woke up at 7 a.m. to a continental breakfast and a violent rainstorm. We happily put on our ponchos but still felt uneasy about leaving. Brock laughed at us all the way back into the hotel as we pushed off into the dark clouds. It was coming down so hard that we couldn't see 5 feet in front of us. Michael had never ridden on busy roads or highways, so that was another first for him. Our communication was non-existent throughout the day due to our inability to see or hear each other. We dealt with busy 2-lane highways and decent truck traffic. Not to mention, our glasses were constantly fogged up due to the cold rain and humid air. Even worse, we sweat on the inside of our rain gear and were as wet as we would be without it. Counterproductive, yet it did protect us from the sting of fast rain hitting bare skin. I warned Michael that we would ride through any and all conditions, and he accepted the challenge. Maybe I should have had him sign a waiver. He figured if I could survive all this so far, he would be able to do it too. Michael's time in the Marines gave him some kind of sick tolerance to adverse situations. We experienced one of the most trying days of the whole trip together. I apologized to him every time we stopped. We were able to smile amidst all these ridiculous conditions, though Michael's smile was more of a, I can't wait to strangle you when we get to safety. I was already defeated by all weather conditions, so nothing could make me want to give up completely. The rain cleared after lunch, and we rode up and down small mountains for the rest of the day. Just can't get a break. We finally reached the outskirts of Athens in the afternoon and found ourselves at a fork in the road. We needed to continue on US 29 to get into the center of town. This fork continued to an interstate with a big sign stating, "No bicycles, pedestrians, or motorized vehicles." I said, fuck it, what else are we gonna do? Nothing was a surprise at this point. We both were completely done with the day, and Michael's knees were starting to give out on him. Apparently, he wasn't prepared for this physical onslaught. We had to turn around, walk our bikes against traffic onto an entrance ramp, and proceed onto another road, hoping it would take us to town. It was about 4 p.m., and I made the call that we should chill out for a bit at Starbucks and dry off. The sun had been out for a while, and we were trying to get our senses back. Michael didn't want a coffee, so I went in and ordered one for myself. Coffee is the one thing that still makes me feel human day by day. While waiting in line, I observed the customers' interactions in front of me. I noticed the cashier was over-the-top friendly. She's one of those kids who smiles at customers so hard that it physically hurts them. I mentally prepared myself to be murdered with kindness once I got to the counter. It was my turn, and I asked for a drip coffee. She had never heard someone use the term drip coffee before. Apparently, she was new and confused about what I was asking for. She couldn't find it on her screen and had to ask one of the other employees. I also don't understand the Starbucks vernacular for sizes. It all happened so fast that I didn't have a chance to tell her it was just a regular cup of coffee from the press and serve container. After entirely too much work, she got the coffee, and I was thankful I didn't have to pretend to be happy any longer. It is possible to be too nice in retail. We rode through downtown Athens, which was an absolute gem. A cozy college town with down-to-earth vibes and cute shops down every sidewalk. I conjured a host home for us from the app, and our hosts, Richard and Carrie, were entertaining and hospitable. They had an encyclopedia's worth of knowledge and a little contempt for the establishment. They explained the entire history of Athens and cooked us a salmon dinner, which was incredible. They were also avid cyclists. Carrie had ridden cross-country as a tour guide for Adventure Cycling Association on the Southern Tier route. We found out that she and I stayed in a few of the same places, only weeks apart. Geeking out about bike travel with someone 30 years older than me was a treat. Once we got ready for bed, Michael admitted to me that he could not continue the rest of the 2 days of riding. He had developed tendinitis in his knee after a 6-year stint in the Marines and felt it after this intense day of riding. I was bummed to hear the grim news, but sometimes you have to let your body do the talking. The next day, Michael had his girlfriend drive down to pick him up, and Richard showed me the way out of town. He gave me a guided tour of the county countryside as we rode through the green rolling hills. He pointed out that all of the roads were named after churches or ranches. This seemed on par with the southern states' historical roots. United States pioneers using religion and manifest destiny to take over swaths of land and leave their own legacy. It's a trip to ride through all these places that have deep histories of injustice and racial tension. I was constantly thinking about political battles and terror that were ravaged during the centuries before. I felt a heaviness in my heart as these themes flowed through my mind. It was this sense of helplessness and understanding that I got to live my life and take a lot for granted because of the atrocities that happened in colonial times. I have zero connection to this place, but the empathetic part of me hurts for the suffering that caused generational pain and loss. Richard only rode with me for 15 miles to show me a waterfall, leaving me to continue for South Carolina on my own. I was planning to make it to the border by the evening. He told me about a particular monument called the Georgia Guidestones. I was able to plan my route to give it a visit. A storm rolled in as I was arriving to the monument, and heavy drops of rain soaked my body. It was a dreary scene, but still, I arrived at the Guidestones and gave them a curious read. The Guidestones are a series of freestanding granite tablets. They stand 16 feet tall, weigh an obscene amount, and each has a passage inscribed in multiple languages. 1. Maintain humanity under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature. 2. Guide reproduction wisely, improving fitness and diversity. 3. Unite humanity with a living new language. 4. Rule passion, faith, tradition, and all things with tempered reason. 5. Protect people and nations with fair laws and just courts. 6. Let all nations rule internally, resolving external disputes in a world court. 7. Avoid petty laws and useless officials. 8. Balance personal rights with social duties. 9. Prize truth, beauty, love, seeking harmony with the infinite. And 10. Be not a cancer on the earth. Leave room for nature. Leave room for nature. Nobody knows the true identity of who commissioned them to be built, but they have been standing since the 1980s and were built in the middle of a field. I enjoyed these guides' sentiments, but wasn't wholly convinced of their ability to change humanity. I was the only one looking at them that afternoon until a box truck parked on the side of the road for no apparent reason. I like to think they were attempting to steal them, but that's just my overactive imagination. I continued through the Georgia countryside, and finally the sun came out after a couple hours. I arrived at the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Hartwell Dam. There's a campground there, but I needed more information about it. I rolled up to the front office and asked the clerk what campsites they had available. He showed me the site map and mentioned it cost $26 to camp. I told him I was only tenting and wouldn't use any utilities, but he said they only had one option. I told him the campground I found online was primitive, but he seemed to know nothing about it. I pulled up my phone to look online and found the one I needed was 2 miles away. I pieced out to go check the cheaper option. Literally down the street, physically next to the dam, was a primitive campground that was empty for $10. I found a spot near the bathrooms and posted up. It was 6 p.m. and I was stoked to stop and have a nice quiet area all to myself. Each site was towered by massive trees and red dirt. I changed into my night clothes and started to unpack my gear. I threw my tent on the ground, as I usually do, and emptied the rest of its components. As I tried organizing my bags, I felt the sky instantly get eerily dark, like a plague sweeping civilization. I was baffled because there hadn't been a cloud in the sky for a couple of hours. Within seconds, the sky let loose and started pouring heavy rain once again. I practically dove over to throw my tent fly over the tent's mesh top, then grabbed my rain jacket. I attempted to put my poles together and install the tent underneath the fly. The poles got caught and knotted while the fly was pulled away from the tent. In an instant, my tent had taken on an inch of water, and I was furious. I had anticipated this moment, where I had to set up camp in the rain, but this scenario was just unfair. No warning at all. Instant thunderstorm. Thankfully, my bags were waterproof and only my tent got wet. I cursed the sky and took my bike and bags into the bathroom. I was bummed, but I eventually got over it and was thankful I had a bathroom all to myself. I got my small stove out and cooked a ramen bomb for dinner. I sat on the floor next to the sink and made phone calls while trying to get cozy. After a couple hours, the rain stopped, and I brought my tent inside the bathroom and flipped it upside down to dry over the stall doors. I was cracking myself up as I was having a sleepover in a public restroom. Nobody else was in the camp, so I knew I didn't have to worry about people coming in. My clothes were soaking wet, and I was dripping head to toe. I turned the lights out and attempted to sleep around 10 p.m. I set my sleeping pad on the wet floor under the sink. I opted to sleep sitting up against the wall, using my towel as a blanket instead. That worked for a while, and I felt myself dozing off. After an hour of no sleep, I got my sleeping bag out and just slept flat on the floor. It turned out to be all right. I was surprised I got any sleep, but very happy that I did. You can't prepare for every situation. I rolled with the punches and found a backup plan. Humility. I had a similar situation happen about a year and a half later when I was attempting to ride the Katy Rail Trail from Clinton, Missouri to St. Louis in 2 days. It was October and I lost daylight faster than expected. I got stuck in the middle of nowhere as the darkness overtook the trail and I couldn't see anything in front of me. I had bought a full pizza for lunch and was carrying it with me on my rear rack. I came to a small town and rode up the main street to see if there was a bar or restaurant open. Nothing. There was a bed and breakfast, but no one answered the door or phone. The bike trail had 2 small single bathrooms, and I decided I would post up there for a night. I locked myself in this small 3x7 bathroom with my bike leaned against the wall and a pizza on the sink. I didn't sleep much, mostly because I heard a bunch of people hooting and hollering at some point and was anxious that a park ranger would somehow find me. My wild imagination. I woke up the next day and ended up buying myself a ticket to take the Amtrak home in the next town up. My body was destroyed. I only had a few milestones to hit while I was in Georgia. My only previous experience there was when my family would barely touch it on our way to vacations in northern Florida. My fondest memory was stopping at some tourist trap where they had over 100 hot sauces from around the world. This time, though, Georgia felt like I met more great people than I saw cool things. The people filled me with hope, but pondering on the dark history of the South will continue to hang heavy on my heart. Still, places like the Guidestones help you have hope in humanity. Somebody trying to offer some kind of positivity in this messed up world. Seeing friends gave me a big morale boost to be able to take on the beginning of the East Coast. I was already dreaming about arriving in Seattle and feeling the Northwest Ocean breeze. However, I have yet to see the Atlantic. I won't be out of the mountains anytime soon, so I'm stuck accepting the strenuous landscapes. Next time I'm in Georgia, I'll find the peach fields.